Welcome back to the deep dive. We are here to take that stack of knowledge you need, all the articles, the research, the expert notes, and we'll turn it into something you can actually use.
And today, we're diving into something that it's a real paradox of modern life, isn't it? Email.
It really is. On the one hand, it feels like the simplest thing in the world. You type, you click send, everyone can do it.
But on the other hand, it is one of the most complex, high-stakes forms of communication we have to deal with every single day.
Right. We just assume we know how to do it.
We assume the skill.
Mm.
But all the sources we reviewed for this prove that effective email writing is, well, it's a highly structured, really sophisticated art form.
Absolutely. And it's not going away. I mean, despite the endless parade of new messaging platforms, you've got Slack, Teams, texts, everything else, email is still the undisputed ironclad workhorse of the digital world.
It is. It's where the formal record lives.
And that's the key, isn't it? That's where the power and the danger come from.
Exactly. Your email is the official, often legally discoverable record of your decisions, your instructions, your professional commitments. If you didn't document it clearly with, a formal closing and precise language,
Then it basically didn't happen.
it becomes incredibly difficult to prove later. It's the paper trail for HR, for legal teams, for the entire history of a project.
So if the stakes are really that high, why is the skill level?
Well, often so low. The source material really hammers this point, that because we use it every day, we think we're masters of it.
But nobody actually teaches you the etiquette, do they?
No.
You learn grammar in school, sure, but you don't get a lesson on the subtle difference between signing off with regards and best regards.
And the consequences of getting that stuff wrong are, they're pretty steep. The sources detail how a seemingly tiny error,
The quick, careless reply.
or an overly familiar greeting to a new client, or a sign-off that just doesn't have the right weight, it can genuinely damage your reputation.
It's not just about being awkward, it's a credibility issue. Completely. You risk having your professionalism questioned. You could undermine a negotiation before it even properly starts.
Or you could just fail to communicate a really crucial instruction because the person reading it was so distracted by your casual tone.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really dissect the anatomy of an email. We want to provide you with a clear, reliable framework for this.
We're trying to move beyond just sending messages. The goal is to communicate with intention, with confidence, and with context.
So you always select the right style for the right situation. Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this anatomy component by component using formality as our main lens.
This is the foundation. It's the key to getting it all right.
Section 2. Let's start where every email journey begins, the subject line. This is where the recipient makes their first and probably most critical decision.
It's the gatekeeper. That's exactly the right word. I mean, think about your own inbox. It's cluttered with hundreds of messages.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
The subject line is the single most important factor. It determines whether your email gets opened, maybe prioritized, or just immediately archived.
So the sources treat it almost like a newspaper headline then. It has to earn that click.
It really does. So when we talk about what the sources call formal imperatives, we're talking about some pretty strict structural rules for this one little line of text.
So what are they? What do you need?
Clarity, brevity, and functionality. A formal subject line has to act as a really succinct, self-contained summary of the entire email.
And ideally, it should signal what action is needed, right?
Exactly. Vague subjects like a question or checking in, they're just frustrating.
They are, because they force me to open it just to figure out how urgent it is.
Right, and that shows a lack of respect for the other person's time.
Okay, so we need a better structure.
Right.
What does a high-performance formal subject line actually look like?
It should usually follow a kind of category-specific format. A good practice is to start with a keyword or a category marker, maybe in brackets, and then follow it with a really specific identifier.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Something like, action required followed by expense report for April review. Or, FYI, policy update. Remote work guidelines.
I see. So those markers let the recipient sort and prioritize instantly without even opening the message.
That's the functionality. It's key for anyone dealing with a high volume of email.
And when the stakes are highest, the sources were very strict about this part, things like job applications or legal stuff.
Oh, absolutely non-negotiable. You have to include specific identifiers. If you're applying for a role, don't just write application. That's useless.
So what should you write?
Something like application for marketing manager position. Your full name reference, hashtag 402, you're making their life easier. You're streamlining their workflow, and you're stopping your email from getting lost in some generic folder.
That's a huge point. Now, if that's the disciplined, formal approach, how much flexibility do we get in the informal world?
Well, informal subject lines are much more relaxed, more conversational. They reflect that you already have a relationship.
So you see things like lunch plans.
Exactly. Or, quick question, the presentation. They're friendlier. They establish that casual tone right from the get-go.
But even with a colleague you know really well, there's still one critical rule that applies, isn't there? The one cardinal sin.
Ah, yes. The blank subject line. The sources are unanimous on this. Even the most casual internal email, a blank subject line is it's a bad luck.
Why is that?
Well, for one, it risks getting overlooked. Or worse, it gets flagged as spam by an aggressive filter.
And even if it gets through, it just suggests you were too careless or too hurried to even bother providing context.
Precisely. It signals a lack of professionalism, even when you're just talking to your peers.
Okay, so once the subject line has done its job and opened that door, the recipient gets to the salutation, the greeting.
And this is where you establish the emotional contract of the email. You're defining the relationship dynamic right there.
For formal communication, this is all about demonstrating respect and a certain professional distance.
Correct. The absolute gold standard is Dear, followed by the appropriate title and the last name. Dear Mr. Chen, Dear Dr. Morales. It's traditional, it's respectful, and there's no ambiguity.
And what about the tricky business of titles, especially when you're addressing a woman?
The consensus in modern professional circles, according to all our material, leans very strongly towards means as the default formal title for women.
Why is that?
It just maintains professionalism without specifying, or worse, assuming their marital status. And of course, if someone has an academic or professional title like doctor or professor, you must use it. It's a fundamental sign of respect.
But the real challenge, the one everyone dreads, is when you just don't know the person's name, or even trickier, their gender identity.
That is the ultimate test, isn't it? The traditional last resorts, dear sir or madam or to whom it may concern, are really strongly discouraged now.
They just sound so dated and impersonal.
They do. They could feel dismissive, like you didn't even try. The sources all emphasize the value of doing a little bit of personalized research.
So a quick look on LinkedIn or the company website.
5 minutes. That's all it takes sometimes. And finding the correct person's name is so much better than using a generic title. If you really can't find the name, some sources suggest using the department or team name, something like Dear Marketing Hiring Team.
And what if you find a name but you're not sure about gender? Say a name like Taylor or Alex.
That's a great point. The gender-neutral title MX is becoming more widely accepted, but it's still not universal, so you have to be a bit careful. A safer bet is often to just drop the title entirely and go with Dear Taylor Rodriguez. The full name shows formality without making any assumptions.
That's a really sophisticated level of awareness. It goes way beyond just grammar. And speaking of subtle details, punctuation matters here too, doesn't it?
It really does. It can signal these subtle regional differences in formality. In most places, especially with British English, you'd use a comma after the salutation. Dear Mr. Smith. Simple.
But in very formal American business writing, you sometimes see something else.
You do. You'll see a colon. Dear Mr. Smith. The colon just feels a little more elevated. It carries a bit more weight, almost like you're about to make a formal declaration. A comma is fine everywhere, but recognizing when a colon is used shows a really deep awareness of business tradition.
Okay, let's flip to informal warmth. What are the safe, versatile options for, say, an internal email?
The real workhorses here are hi and hello. They're so versatile. They suit most semi-formal situations. A first email to a new team member, a quick check-in with your manager, hi Sarah, is warm, friendly, and efficient.
And then we have to talk about the one that pushes the boundary. We have to talk about hey.
Hey. This is where so many people, especially younger professionals, get into a bit of trouble because it's so common in texting.
The sources have a strong warning about this one, don't they?
A very strong warning. K is extremely casual. It can almost sound like you're demanding immediate attention, and it often comes across as overly familiar or even a little passive-aggressive if you use it with someone you don't know really well.
So when is it actually okay to use?
You should probably reserve hey for colleagues you have a genuinely established friendly rapport with, the people you get coffee with.
Not your new client.
Definitely not your new client.
Yeah.
Or an executive or professor. Using hey in those situations risks signaling that you just don't take the professional relationship seriously. It can come across as a form of digital disrespect. If you are ever unsure, just default to hi.
So once the greeting has set the stage, the opening line has to immediately signal your intent.
Yes, this is all about saving the recipient time and establishing your purpose right away.
In formal emails, the focus is just pure efficiency. You get to the point, but you do it politely.
Exactly. The rule here is clarity and no ambiguity. You should aim to state the purpose of your email within the very first sentence or two. We call them explicit openers.
Give me some examples of those.
Things like, I am writing to inquire about the status of the Q2 project review, or this email is to confirm our meeting scheduled for Tuesday at 3 p.m. Straightforward.
And if it's a follow-up,
Then you have to provide that context immediately. Following up on our discussion regarding the new vendor contract, I have attached the updated terms. No mystery.
it sounds almost clinical, but that precision, it actually communicates respect, doesn't it?
It communicates that you value their time. You're not making them hunt around for the reason you've just landed in their inbox. You're leading with the action.
Now, informal emails often flip this structure completely. They tend to lead with a kind of social buffer.
They do. They often mimic the flow of in-person small talk. You lead with a friendly pleasantry.
I hope you're having a great week.
Or, hope you're doing well after that intense sprint. It softens the request, and it builds connection. It shows you see the recipient as a person, not just a task manager on the other end.
But the source material does caution against letting those pleasantries turn into rambling.
And that's the balance you have to strike. Rapport is important, of course, but the email still needs to deliver its core message efficiently. If your opener goes on for 3 paragraphs before you finally get to the quarterly budget,
You've lost them.
you've failed. So even with a soft opener, get to the point within 3 to 5 lines.
Okay, now we are entering the heart of the email, the body. This is where the structural and linguistic differences are most pronounced.
And where we really need to spend some analytical time, because this is where most messages succeed or fail.
Let's start with formal precision.
Uh-huh.
This seems to be less about just writing skill and more about, structural engineering.
That's a perfect way to put it. A formal email body must be logically organized. You have to avoid those huge walls of text at all costs.
So you segment the information.
Into short, clear paragraphs. Each one should deal with one specific topic or one specific action item.
And for complex information, anything with data, dates, multiple points, the sources insist on using structured lists.
Bullet points or numbered lists are absolutely essential for readability. But even here, there's a nuance that separates the real masters from the novices.
And what's that?
Effective bullet points must maintain what's called parallel structure.
So if your first point starts with a verb,
Then all the following points should start with the same tense of a verb. For example, 1. Review the draft budget. 2. Finalize the client proposal. 3. Schedule the follow-up meeting.
I see. So it's not 1, reviewing the budget, 2, the client proposal should be finalized.
No, that breaks the rhythm. The parallel structure ensures it's incredibly easy to read, and it prevents the reader from getting mentally snagged on the different formats.
That attention to parallelism is a fantastic technical detail. Okay, let's talk about the language itself. How precise do we have to be?
Meticulously polite and precise. This means you have to strictly avoid almost everything you'd use in casual speech. No slang, no cliches, no tech speak.
The tone has to stay respectful, objective, and neutral.
Especially when you're discussing sensitive topics or, a conflict. If you need to use jargon, you have to be 100% certain that it's industry standard and universally understood by your recipient. Never guess.
And the absolute non-negotiable bedrock of all of this is grammar and punctuation.
Non-negotiable is exactly the right word. Perfect grammar and spelling aren't just nice to haves in a formal email. They are prerequisites for being taken seriously.
Because errors signal carelessness.
And carelessness in your communication suggests carelessness in your business. And that can cost you deals, it can cost you opportunities.
Now, you mentioned a specific, very subtle detail earlier that signals ultra-formality avoiding contractions. I want to dig into the why behind that rule. It feels minor, but it seems to carry a huge amount of weight.
It is a profound signal. Using the full form, I do not agree, instead of I don't agree, or it is a pleasure, instead of it's a pleasure, it subtly increases the psychological distance and the gravitas of the communication.
So contractions are shortcuts.
They are, and formal writing avoids shortcuts because it implies that the sender has taken the time and the care to write out every single word. This deliberate pace, this extra effort, signals respect and professionalism. It makes the writing feel more sophisticated, more thoughtful, and frankly, more serious.
That's a powerful justification. It's linking formality directly to perceived competency. Okay, let's pivot to informal conversation. How much of that structural and linguistic discipline can we lose here?
Quite a bit, happily. The structure is much more flexible. It often flows more like a natural, rapid dialogue.
So contractions are okay here.
Not just okay, they're often preferred. They help maintain that natural conversational tone. You can use common understood acronyms like ETA or RSVP with colleagues, as long as you know they're familiar with them.
But even with a close colleague, you can't just send a stream of consciousness, can you? There has to be coherence.
Absolutely. While the rules are relaxed, the core goal is still clarity. A message that's rushed, poorly punctuated, or full of typos, even if they're minor, it forces your colleague to spend extra mental energy just deciphering it.
And that still reflects poorly on you.
It does. And it impedes collaboration. The tone can be expressive and personal. You might share a brief anecdote, but it must be coherent.
Okay, moving out of the core content, we get to the closing line. This is the sentence that's responsible for signaling the next steps.
Yes, what you expect to happen next. Formal closing lines must be polite, but also anticipatory. They manage the expectations for what comes next.
So you're signaling the desired action, whether it's a response or a confirmation or just a thank you.
Exactly. The standard is something like, I look forward to hearing from you, or thank you for your time and consideration.
And if you've asked for help,
Then you'd say, your assistance in this matter is greatly appreciated. But crucially, you should also offer an out. Something like, please do not hesitate to contact me if you require further clarification. That's highly professional and makes it clear where the ball is.
informal closing lines, on the other hand, they just maintain that friendly, open-ended flow.
Yeah, they aim to keep the conversational door open. You'll see things like, let me know what you think when you have a chance, or talk to you soon, or just have a great weekend. They're friendly and very low pressure.
And this leads us directly into the sign-off, or the valediction. This is the final piece of the puzzle. And the hierarchy of formal sign-offs is surprisingly subtle.
This is a zone of high social risk if you choose the wrong one. We should probably detail the hierarchy, starting with the classics.
Okay.
Sincerely, or yours sincerely. This is the classic, default, absolutely safe choice when you know the recipient's name. It carries the traditional weight of formal letter writing.
And what about its slightly archaic partner?
Yours faithfully. This is historically reserved for when you don't know the recipient's name. It's the traditional partner to Dear Sir Madam.
But the sources say it's not really used much anymore.
It's very rare in modern email. It can sound quite stiff, overly traditional. It's usually better to find a way to personalize the greeting than to have to rely on this particular sign-off.
So if the classics feel a bit heavy, what are the modern, versatile, professional defaults?
That would be best regards and kind regards. These are the most widely accepted professional valedictions today. They strike a really excellent balance between respect and warmth.
Is there a difference between them?
A very slight one. Kind regards is generally seen as marginally warmer and a little less formal than best regards. But both of them signal professionalism without being stuffy.
Now let's talk about the short form, just regards.
This is where we need to be careful. While it is technically professional, regards can often come across as cool or distant or even a bit abrupt.
Because it's so neutral and efficient.
Exactly. So if your goal is to build a relationship or maybe soften a difficult request, regards can unintentionally undermine that effort. I'd say use it only when you have a very transaction-oriented relationship where no warmth is really required.
Okay, switching to informal sign-offs, there's so many choices and they're often regional.
They are. The single word best is incredibly versatile. It works well in semi-formal and informal internal emails. It's simple, safe, and friendly.
And then you have regional ones like cheers.
Right. Very widespread in British English and in Australia. It's upbeat and friendly, but you should really only use it with known colleagues who share that cultural context. It can sound a bit odd otherwise.
And if the email was asking for something?
Then you can integrate your gratitude right into the sign-offs. Thanks or many thanks. These are perfect when you're expressing appreciation or confirming a request has been received.
What about something like, take care?
That's a warm option, but it's personal. You should save that for people you have an established good relationship with, people whose well-being you genuinely know and care about.
And finally, before we move on, the signature, your digital business card.
In formal correspondence, your signature block is non-negotiable. It has to contain your full name, your precise job title, the company name, and your primary phone number.
And you can add things like a website or a LinkedIn profile.
You can, but keep the block visually simple and clean. It provides immediate, verifiable credibility and gives people other ways to contact you.
And informally, we ditch all that complexity.
Absolutely. For a quick internal email or a reply within a long thread, just signing off with your first name is perfectly sufficient. It respects the speed of the interaction.
Okay. We've established the entire structure. Now we need to move into the more subtle stuff, the linguistic elements that determine how a message is actually felt by the person reading it.
This is where the artistry really comes in. Since we don't have body language in an email, tiny details can have a massive impact.
Let's start with the perils of punctuation, and specifically the exclamation point rule. In formal contexts, the sources advise using it with, what was the phrase, extreme caution.
That's right. And I think a lot of people overuse them because they're trying to compensate for the lack of tone. They're trying to make the text sound less aggressive or maybe convey some enthusiasm.
But the result is often the opposite.
Frequently, overusing exclamation points in formal communication, and especially using more than one in a single message, can make the sender seem unprofessional, maybe immature, or overly emotional. It completely undermines the serious, measured tone that business correspondence requires.
But one is sometimes okay.
A single, well-placed one might convey genuine excitement about, say, a shared success. But two or more almost always crosses the line into what feels like an emotional overreaction.
So the professional standard is just the humble period.
Yes, the period communicates neutrality and competence. In informal communication, though, exclamation points are perfectly acceptable for conveying energy and friendliness.
Which brings us to the emoji policy. The formal rule here is pretty stark, isn't it?
It is absolute. In formal emails to clients, new contacts, executives, in any legal matters, do not use them. Ever.
Why so strict?
Because emojis, even a simple smiley face, immediately detract from the gravity and the professionalism of the message. They are visual shorthand for emotion, and formal communication relies on precise language, not cartoons.
But I want to challenge that just a little bit. What about industries that are inherently more visual or relationship focused, high-end marketing or certain creative fields? Do the source materials offer any slight exceptions?
That's a fair question. And yes, they do, with some big caveats. If you are communicating internally within a highly creative or design-focused team, where the team culture explicitly endorses a more playful visual brand, you might get away with it.
But only internally.
Only. The moment the communication leaves your established, known bubble, the second it goes to a new vendor, a financial partner, a PR firm, the standard reverts to absolute zero emojis. It's a risk calculation that almost never favors using the emoji.
So the lesson is, know your audience, and when in doubt, default to professionalism.
Always.
Okay, let's move on to grammar, spelling, and credibility. This sounds basic, but the sources link these failures directly to high-stakes business failures.
They do. In formal communication, errors just decimate your credibility and they undermine trust. Think about it from a client's perspective. If they get a proposal that's riddled with spelling errors, what's the implicit message?
If they can't pay attention to the details of their own proposal, why should I trust them with the details of my multi-million-dollar project?
Precisely. Errors make the sender look careless, uneducated, or just plain lazy. It's an instant loss of authority.
So what's the best practical defense against this? How do you catch your own mistakes?
The sources strongly advocate for reading your formal emails aloud before you hit send.
Why does that work so well?
Because your brain is fantastic at auto-correcting what it thinks you wrote on the screen. But reading it aloud forces you to process every single word individually. It helps you catch not only typos and grammatical mistakes, but also that awkward or confusing phrasing that sounds fine in your head, but just terrible when it's spoken.
That's a powerful tool. And while informal communication is more relaxed, good grammar still matters, right?
It does. I mean, a minor typo to a colleague is obviously forgivable. But consistent errors or messages that are just a mess of abbreviations, it makes the reader slow down and work harder. Even with friends, clarity is king. If you sacrifice clarity for speed, you're often sacrificing collaboration too.
Next up, we have to address what the sources call the risky business of humor and sarcasm.
This is where written communication so often fails the sender.
Why is humor so dangerous in a professional email?
Because humor is highly subjective, and the written word has no built-in irony detector. What you find hilarious, your recipient might find confusing or inappropriate or even hostile. You lose all the things that make a joke land in person: the vocal tone, the facial expression, the shared context.
And sarcasm is the absolute riskiest game to play.
It is lethal in text. Sarcasm relies almost entirely on tone for you to interpret it correctly. If you write, "That project deadline sounds incredibly reasonable, just great," the reader has no idea what you mean.
They might genuinely think you're pleased.
Or they might pick up on the negativity without recognizing the irony, which just makes you sound passive-aggressive and difficult to work with.
So the advice for formal emails is simple. Avoid it entirely.
Completely. Avoid humor and sarcasm in all formal settings. The source material is crystal clear. The risk of misinterpretation is just too high, and the stakes of damaging a professional relationship are too great.
And informally.
You should only indulge in a playful tone when you have a very strong established rapport, and even then, only if the joke is gentle and utterly unambiguous. If you have to ask yourself, will this land okay? Just delete it.
Finally, in this section, we have to look beyond our own desks because etiquette isn't universal. It shifts across cultural and generational divides.
This is so critical for anyone working internationally or at a big multinational company. Communication norms are heavily influenced by culture.
Right. The U.S. style, for example, is often hyper-direct, focused on efficiency. We want the purpose of the email right up front. We value brevity.
Exactly. But you can contrast this with styles that are preferred in parts of Asia or even some European countries where the approach is much more indirect and relationship-focused. They might prioritize a longer preamble focused on politeness and the status of the relationship and shared context before they even think about making a request.
And if you skip that preamble,
It can be seen as rude or overly aggressive.
so if I'm emailing a colleague in, say, Germany, I should probably expect and deliver a higher degree of structural formality than I might for an American counterpart.
Absolutely. The German business culture often values structural precision and formality very highly. By contrast, if you're emailing a new contact in the UK, their email might appear warmer and more subtle than a US email. It might rely more on implied meaning and those soft pleasantries. Being aware of these cultural variances is just vital.
And we also have generational differences at play, often in the same office.
This is what some people call the texting creep phenomenon. Younger generations who grew up with the instant feedback and brevity of texting and messaging apps. They often default to a very concise, casual style. They use acronyms, limited punctuation, short bursts of text. They prioritize speed.
And they're communicating with older generations who grew up with traditional letter writing conventions.
Exactly. An older generation might expect a detailed salutation, full sentences, a highly formal closing a structure that basically resembles a physical letter. When a new hire sends a high-priority update to a senior executive that's just full of acronyms and ends with "fex,"
It creates friction.
it does. Awareness lets you tailor your formality upward to meet the senior person's expectations. It helps you avoid signaling unintentional disrespect.
Okay, we've established the rules. Now let's talk strategy. This is the decision-making process for you, the listener. When you're in doubt, how do you make the right choice?
We begin with what the sources call the golden rule of safety. This is the core strategic principle for all professional correspondence. When in doubt, go formal.
So it's always safer to be too formal than too casual. Why is that?
It comes down to an asymmetry of effort and respect. Being excessively formal is almost always interpreted as a sign of respect, of diligence, of professionalism. It is virtually impossible to offend someone by being too formal.
But being too casual is easy to get wrong.
It is. Being overly familiar, using "hey" with a new client, for instance, is so difficult to recover from. It creates an immediate impression of sloppiness or a lack of understanding of the social hierarchy.
So if you start too formal, you can always relax your tone later on.
Precisely. If you begin with "Dear Mrs. Jones" and sign off sincerely, and she replies with "Hi Jen, best," she has just given you permission to drop the formality. You can ratchet down without any consequence.
But you can't go the other way.
It's very awkward. If you start too casually, trying to ratchet up the formality in your next email feels forced or even like you're being reprimanded. The safe bet is always to demonstrate the maximum level of respect at the beginning.
Let's list the specific scenarios requiring respect. The non-negotiables that mandate full formal etiquette.
Okay, these are the high-stakes, official, or first impression situations. Any communication involving job applications, cover letters, or any follow-up with potential employers must be strictly formal.
And that first contact with any new professional relationship.
Correct. Your first email to a new client, a new business contact, a vendor, a professor, an external partner, always formal. Internally, formality is required when you're communicating with senior management, anyone significantly above you, unless they explicitly tell you otherwise.
And then there's the official stuff.
Official requests, formal complaints, any HR documentation, or legal correspondence, all of that requires absolute precision and formality to serve as a reliable, respectful record.
Okay, now for the lighter side. The informal scenarios where rapport and speed are more important.
These are scenarios where the relationship is already highly established and friendly.
Hmm.
So, communicating with trusted colleagues you know well, especially those on your immediate team.
Quick updates, check-ins, simple questions.
Exactly. You can be informal in those cases, but remember the key caveat. The relationship must be pre-established. You shouldn't be informal with a new contact just because they happen to work at the same company.
That brings us to the fascinating area where most of our professional life actually happens, the semi-formal relationship. How do we navigate that gray zone?
This is the art of mirroring. For those semi-formal relationships, the most sophisticated strategy is to observe and then match the tone and formality of the person you're corresponding with. You let them set the standard.
So if I get an email that's structurally formal, "Dear host speaker, I am writing to inquire about," but it signs off with just "best," what does that tell me?
It tells you that they maintain a formal structure, but they're offering a slight warmth in the closing. So you should mirror that. Maintain the formal greeting and the structured body, but you can feel comfortable using that less stuffy sign-off. Maybe you can even include a contraction or two in the body of your reply.
And conversely, if I get an email from a new manager that starts with "hi first name" and ends with "talk soon," that's my cue to relax the tone completely.
Exactly. They have just signaled permission for a relaxed level of formality. Mirroring that tone shows a really sophisticated social awareness and emotional intelligence. It demonstrates that you read more than just the content of their message. You read the signals about the accepted boundary and the relationship dynamic.
But always remember the golden rule.
If they are senior to you, they set the standard and you follow. Always.
This has truly been a deep dive into the quiet art of the inbox. We've covered, everything from the technical requirements of parallel bullet points to the psychological implications of avoiding a single contraction.
It really just underscores that mastering email etiquette is a fundamental skill for professional success. The distinction between formal and informal. It's not just about choosing words, it's a profound reflection of your social awareness, your respect for the context, and your ability to adapt.
We established that formal emails build credibility through precision and structure. They make sure important messages carry the necessary weight and convey professionalism.
While informal emails are just essential for fostering strong collaboration and maintaining that warm rapport with your colleagues, the ultimate goal, regardless of the style you choose, must always be clear, effective, and respected communication.
We hope this deep dive helps you move from being someone who merely sends messages to someone who communicates with real intention and confidence, ensuring every single email is not just understood, but truly appreciated.
For our final provocative thought for you to consider, let's just reflect on the constant erosion of traditional formality. We talked about that hierarchy of sign-offs. Sincerely, best regards, regards, best. Notice how the length and the effort involved are constantly shrinking.
The single word "best" is quickly becoming the default, isn't it? Even in semi-formal communication.
It is. So here is the question for you to think about. How do we as intentional communicators push back against that tide of sheer efficiency? When the current professional standard defaults to the efficient but kind of distant best, how can you use the full spectrum of formality we've discussed, the sincerely or the "I look forward to hearing from you," to consciously invest more effort into a message?
Because that thoughtfulness, that extra bit of effort you choose to deploy where other people are just defaulting to speed.
That is the true key to standing out and building unwavering credibility.